Welcome to Weirdly Cozy. Today you are going on the journey of a lifetime as a boy who once ate a watermelon seed. You know what your mother said about eating watermelon seeds. I never listened to my mom, and look where it got me. She's in a better place now. No, not where you think. She divorced my dad a while back and moved to Florida, and now entertains a number of unruly boyfriends who I greatly disapprove of. Wait, I'm sorry. This is not what you came here for. So sit back, relax, and with a wondering mind and a few sprinkles of sand, some sleep. And if you're not into sleeping, drink something caffeinated, like Slurb, while you go into a deep state of focus, productivity, and pure bliss. And now we begin. The Watermelon Man, a relaxing and funny story, a soft and silly journey of botanical destiny and corporate dread. Chapter 1: The Forbidden Seed. Wendell Wadsworth was a child like any other, curious, mildly sticky, and constantly surprised by the taste of his own elbow. He lived in a modest house with a big backyard, the kind of backyard that had too many dandelions and exactly one metal sprinkler that would always hit you in the face, no matter where you stood. One warm summer afternoon, Wendell's Aunt Lorna, a woman made entirely of windbreaker fabric and suspicion, brought over a watermelon the size of a small ottoman. It was striped, like a lizard, cold as betrayal, and allegedly seedless, which, of course, it wasn't. "Now listen close, Wendell," she said, eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses, even though they were already on her forehead. "Don't you dare swallow a seed. You hear me? They'll sprout in your tummy and grow into vines. And vines don't pay rent." Wendell blinked. He was 6. He didn't pay rent either. But something about her tone, the solemn warning wrapped in mystery and mild paranoia, made it stick in his brain like peanut butter on shag carpet. Naturally, he ate 7 seeds. He didn't mean to. But as he sat on the porch swing, legs dangling, cheeks puffed full of watermelon like a red-cheeked chipmunk, one went down the wrong tube, then another. Then it was like the seeds knew. They slipped in like little traders, one by one, until Wendell had become a walking heirloom garden of accidental botany. His cousin Ricky, ever the neighborhood mythologist, gasped. "You're gonna turn into a watermelon," he whispered, as though sharing state secrets. "It happened to my Uncle Gary. Last I heard, he works at Jamba Juice, as the blender." Wendell giggled, but something inside his belly gave a little twang. It might have been gas. It might have been destiny. That night, Wendell lay in bed and waited. He poked his stomach. It didn't glow. It didn't rumble. It didn't even wiggle. He drank some water, because Aunt Lorna said that would make the seeds grow faster, and whispered to his belly button, "Be cool, okay?" Then he fell asleep and dreamed of farmers markets, jazz music, and talking fruit. The next morning, something was different. For one, Wendell felt moist, not sweaty, not damp, just hydrated in a way that made his t-shirt cling to him like he'd just walked through fog made of Gatorade. His mom said, "You've got a glow about you," which could have been affection or mold. At recess, Wendell ran faster than usual, not because he wanted to, but because the bees wouldn't leave him alone. They followed him like he owed them money, and when he tripped and scraped his knee, the blood had a faint pink hue and a suspiciously fruity scent. A lunch lady sniffed the air. Someone opened a Jolly Rancher. No, Brenda. No, they did not. Over the next few weeks, more strange things happened. His sweat started smelling like watermelon candy. The family dog began licking his legs compulsively, A sunflower in the backyard leaned toward him every time he walked by. Wendell's parents chalked it up to just being a weird phase. Kids go through phases, right? Some suck their thumbs, some collect rocks, some apparently begin their slow transformation into fruit-bearing organisms. But Wendell didn't mind. He felt connected, like the earth was humming at a frequency only he could hear, a juicy, summery, melodic frequency. Still, deep down, part of him wondered if Aunt Lorna was right, because every now and then, when he sat very still and held his breath, he could feel it, a tiny seed deep in his belly, settling in, stretching out, planting itself like it had found home. Wendell Wadsworth didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a long, slightly squishy journey, a journey that would lead to cubicles, spreadsheets, and a life of juice-based discomfort. But for now, he was just a kid, a watermelon boy, unpeeled, waiting to ripen. Chapter 2. Sprouting Puberty. Wendell Wadsworth's journey into puberty was not so much a transformation as it was a slow agricultural process. While other kids were discovering deodorant, rebellious haircuts, and angsty acoustic guitar playlists, Wendell was discovering chlorophyll, not metaphorically, literally. It began one spring morning, as the birds chirped, the sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, and Wendell stared at the green spiral curling out of his left armpit. "Mom," he called calmly, "I think I'm blooming." His mother blinked. "What?" Wendell raised his arm. A dainty green tendril waved back at her like a polite worm. There was silence, then a shrug. "Just shave around it, honey." By 7th grade, things had escalated. Wendell was growing vines, actual, spiraling, photosynthesizing vines. They peeked from his sleeves. They curled around his shoelaces. They occasionally tangled with passing janitorial equipment. Gym class became an event. "Wadsworth, you're rooted to the dodgeball court again," Coach Harper would sigh. "Stop anchoring." Wendell would blush, then try to yank his ankle vine free from the floor, like an awkward houseplant trying to make varsity. His classmates were baffled. "He's like if a chia pet got into essential oils," said Jessica from band. "I think he's part zucchini," mumbled Trevor during lunch. One kid offered him Miracle Grow as a joke. Wendell declined politely, but kept it in his locker just in case he had a rough week. He started wearing oversized hoodies year-round to cover the vines. It helped, but it also made him sweat more, which, unfortunately, just made him smell more like a fresh fruit salad. Even worse, the fruit flies. They followed him around in buzzing clouds. During group projects, he had to bring his own citronella candle. He told the teacher it was for ambiance. She nodded, deeply confused. Then came the voice change. Most boys' voices cracked like broken violins. Wendell's voice cracked like someone squishing a melon in slow motion. One day, he sneezed in class, and the echo sounded like a jazz trombone underwater. "Bless you," said his teacher, unsure if he had in fact sneezed or just ripened a bit. It got to the point where, during a school assembly, Wendell coughed, and 3 kids spontaneously started craving watermelon. A rumor spread that he was being harvested in the summer. His facial hair came in oddly too. Not a mustache, not a beard, a kind of mossy shadow, like his cheeks were prepping to host moss garden festivals. Even shaving was tricky. His chin vines had opinions. If he pressed too hard, they'd retract like offended spaghetti noodles. His dad tried to teach him about razors and manhood, but ended up just handing him a tiny trellis and some light pruning shears. "Every man's different," his dad mumbled, trimming Wendell's cheek tendrils like a bonsai master. You're just greener. By ninth grade, Wendell had accepted a few truths. His backpack would always contain at least one emergency Mr. bottle. He would never win at hide and seek because his leaves rustled when he breathed, and he would always be that kid in the yearbook, the one with the sunglasses, the hoodie, and the suspicious vine poking out the zipper. And yet, some part of him liked it. When the sun hit just right through the window in algebra class, Wendell would feel his vines stir, stretch, lean into the light like lazy cats. He could feel the warmth in his fingertips. He felt alive. He felt connected. Also, his vitamin D levels were immaculate. By the end of high school, Wendell had reached full sprout status. His vines had matured. His personality had mellowed into a calm, fruity confidence. And while he wasn't exactly popular, he was respected. The chess club called him the Vine Whisperer. The drama kids tried to cast him as the Giving Tree. Even the cafeteria ladies started offering him compostable lunch trays, just in case he was edible. He wore it all with pride. Well, mostly. At prom, when his date pinned a boutonniere on his lapel, a tiny watermelon bud bloomed on his wrist in response. Everyone clapped. The DJ dedicated watermelon sugar to him. It was awkward, but sweet. Puberty had changed everyone. But Wendell? He didn't just grow up, he grew out. And underneath all the vines, awkward smells, and pollen allergies, he was ready to face the world, or at least accounting school. Chapter 3, Degrees of Juiciness. Wendell Wadsworth had a gift, not the kind you brag about at dinner parties or list on resumes under special skills, but a deeply personal, inherently moist sort of gift. He was juicy, not metaphorically, biologically, and while most young adults embraced college with wide eyes, empty wallets, and an experimental attitude toward ramen, Wendell arrived like a portable greenhouse, damp, optimistic, and slightly overgrown. College was a transition. He moved into dorm room 406B with a duffel bag full of oversized hoodies, a gallon jug of distilled water labeled for emergencies, and a spritz bottle named Lenny. His roommate, Kyle, was a pre-law major with a penchant for cologne and loud online gaming. On day one, Kyle stared at Wendell's vines and asked if he was into cosplay or just like very outdoorsy. Wendell offered him a slice of watermelon and said, "Botanically gifted." Kyle never asked again. Wendell majored in accounting because he wanted stability. Vines, he reasoned, were unpredictable enough. He needed a career that didn't require risky movement or excessive sunlight. Accounting, it turned out, was like a spreadsheet blanket, bland, boxed in, and blessedly fluorescent. Perfect for a plant boy trying to fly under the radar. He tried a few other majors first. Botany made him uncomfortable. He felt watched. Music was great until the saxophone kept slipping out of his juice-slick hands mid-solo. Theater ended quickly after his understudy tripped on one of Wendell's ankle vines during A Midsummer Night's Dream and suffered an allergic reaction. So he crunched numbers, quietly, methodically, while secretly daydreaming about running away to a vineyard in Tuscany and finally embracing his full melonhood. Despite his best efforts to blend in, Wendell developed a reputation on campus. He was the only student whose backpack emitted light mist in the spring. His hair, lush, green-tinged, and leaf-flecked, once got nominated for Most Likely to Photosynthesize in the campus paper. A barista at the campus cafe insisted he made the best-tasting sweat she'd ever smelled. Like strawberry gum with a hint of wet lawn. Still, he lived a quiet life. His dorm windowsill was filled with succulents that bowed toward him every morning like tiny chlorophyll monks. He avoided eye contact with campus groundskeepers, and every third Tuesday, he'd need to discreetly prune himself behind the library with garden shears and a podcast about tax law. But the thing was, Wendell liked accounting. There was something calming about numbers. They didn't judge you for sprouting leaves. They didn't run away when your elbow bloomed. They didn't shriek, "He's sprouting," in the middle of a study session. They were just quiet little puzzles, click-clack order in a loud and chaotic world. And Wendell was good at them. So good, in fact, that he earned the nickname the Ledger Lettuce during a particularly competitive group audit project. Graduation day was sunny, almost too sunny. Wendell wore a long-sleeved gown with internal humidity control, a cap anchored by hair clips and zip ties, and waterproof loafers, just in case. As the valedictorian droned on about ambition, Wendell leaned gently toward the sun, feeling the warm kiss of UV rays. A tiny flower popped open on his shoulder. The person next to him whispered, "Did your robe just bloom?" Wendell smiled. Seasonal flair. He walked across the stage and accepted his diploma in accounting, minor in environmental humidity management. The dean shook his hand with mild hesitation and muttered, "You're moist." Wendell gave his classic response, "Photosynthesis is thirsty work." Then he went home, peeled off his gown, watered his calves, and stared into the bathroom mirror. He was no longer a viney little boy. He was a certified adult with a real degree and real responsibilities and real, looming student loans. A week later, he got a job offer from Grindle and Grindle Financial Solutions, LLC. It was a mid-sized accounting firm in the city. Office cubicles, water cooler, access to natural light every third Wednesday. His starting salary came with a dental plan, limited sick leave, and a plant-friendly ergonomic chair, which HR said was a happy coincidence. Wendell accepted, and just like that, the freshly minted watermelon man entered the corporate world, dewy, anxious, and ready to bloom under artificial lighting. Chapter 4, The Cubicle Chronicles. Wendell Wadsworth's first day at Grindle and Grindle Financial Solutions, LLC began as all legendary office careers do, with awkward small talk, an overcooked bagel, and a promotional tote bag full of branded pens that smelled faintly of toner and despair. He arrived 15 minutes early, just as the sun peeked over the city skyline. He stood outside the revolving doors, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "Let's vine up." Then he walked in, softly, like a gentleman's salad. The office, the Grindle and Grindle office, was beige, unapologetically beige. Walls, carpets, cubicles, even some of the employees. A colorless sea of taupe and polite coughing. Wendell was escorted by a woman named Cheryl from HR, who smelled like printer ink and lemon disappointment. She handed him a clipboard, a key card, and a map to the break room you may use but not occupy. Then she shook his hand and immediately said, "You're damp." Wendell gave his usual smile. "It's a surface-level dew point issue." Cheryl wrote something down and walked away with a forced grin. Thus began the cubicle years. His space. Wendell's cubicle was a 6x6 foam fortress, 3 half walls of felt and false promises. The desk came pre-decorated with a motivational poster that said, "You miss 100% of the audits you don't file." His ergonomic chair made a sad pfft sound when he sat down. which echoed off the acoustic ceiling tiles like a defeated balloon. Within hours, Wendell began personalizing. He placed a tiny succulent named Rhonda next to his monitor. He draped a vine over the cubicle wall to soften the harsh angles. He brought in a sun lamp shaped like a smiling sun wearing sunglasses, and he stuck a post-it on his monitor that said, "You are not just a melon, you are a whole snack." By noon, 2 co-workers had reported him to facilities for inappropriate horticulture. The co-workers, Wendell's neighbors in Cubicle Alley, were exactly what you'd expect from mid-level corporate lifers. To his left, Gordon, a 55-year-old man with strong opinions on fax machines and weak opinions on everything else. To his right, Debbie, a fastidious spreadsheet warrior who alphabetized her chewing gum. Across the aisle, Kyle, not College Kyle, who introduced himself by saying, "Don't touch my yogurt, I label it, I mean it." Nobody really knew what Wendell did, but everyone referred to him as Mel, short for melon, a nickname that had cemented itself within the first week like wet cement under flip-flops. "Hey Mel," they'd say, "you've got a leaf in your inbox." Or, "Hey Mel, your elbow's dripping again." He'd smile, nod, then quietly spritz himself with Lenny, his now vintage hydration bottle. The work Wendell's actual job was painfully straightforward. He inputted numbers from one box into a slightly different box. Sometimes the boxes had formulas. Sometimes they had glaring errors, which he'd correct with a quiet sense of triumph. And sometimes he stared at the blinking cursor and wondered if this was what destiny looked like, stuck between cells E42 and F91. Once, during a quarterly expense review, he fell into a kind of spreadsheet trance, eyes glazed, fingers clicking in time with the office AC. He awoke an hour later with a completed balance sheet and a vine wrapped around his neck like a sleepy scarf. The office culture Fridays were casual day, which meant Wendell swapped his damp dress shirt for a damp novelty t-shirt that said Seed Money Manager. Nobody laughed, but someone did take a picture. He heard it ended up on the company Slack with the caption, "Melon Management Consulting." Lunch was sad. He'd sit at his desk with a Tupperware of cubed watermelon, the only food his body didn't mildly revolt against. Sometimes someone would ask, "Isn't it weird eating your own kind?" To which Wendell would reply, "Self-care is complicated." The plants. Oddly, the office greenery loved Wendell. The potted ficus near reception turned toward him when he walked by. The dusty snake plant near the copier perked up when he cleared paper jams. And the break room spider plant once dropped all its babies in his lap. Eventually, people just started assigning him plant care duty. He didn't mind. The plants were better conversationalists than most of his co-workers. They never asked about his 5-year plan or whether he was bringing a date to the holiday party. Sometimes, late at night, he'd water them all in silence. Just him, the foliage, and the soft glow of a flickering fluorescent bulb above the snack machine. It was almost peaceful. The routine weeks blurred into months. Wendell settled into his cubicle life like moss on a brick. Each day was a gentle loop. Log in, glisten lightly, enter data, missed Rhonda, think about quitting, stay for dental. He wasn't happy, exactly, but he was rooted, grounded, organized, and occasionally photosynthesizing at a solid 60%. But every once in a while, he'd pause, maybe while highlighting cells, maybe while listening to Debbie rant about font choices, maybe while watching a bee buzz against the third-story office window. And he'd wonder, was this it? Was he destined to wilt here, under buzzing fluorescent lights and passive-aggressive fridge notes? Was there more to life than conditional formatting? Could a watermelon man ever be more than a walking fruit joke in a J. Crew shirt? He didn't have the answers, but he knew this. He was very, very good at expense reports. And vines are patient. Chapter 5. Lunchroom Lamentations. By his third month at Grindle & Grindle Financial Solutions, LLC, Wendell Wadsworth had learned two immutable truths about corporate life. No one really knows what's happening in the break room microwave. And if your lunch leaks even a whiff of watermelon, you become the lunch guy. Wendell had always hoped his lunch would say something cool about him. I'm cultured. I meal prep with vision. I've mastered adulting in quinoa. But Wendell's lunch said none of those things. It said, I am 68% melon and emotionally resigned. The routine. Every day at precisely 12:02 p.m., Wendell would drift toward the break room like a humid ghost. Not 12 o'clock, because that's when the microwaves were full. Not 12:05, because by then, the passive-aggressive fridge notes were at their spiciest. He'd bring his lunch in a soft-sided cooler with a cactus pattern and a zipper that screamed every time he opened it. Inside, one glass container of carefully cubed watermelon, one bamboo fork, one folded paper towel, and a small bottle of lemon-infused hydration mist for emotional support. The judgment. He tried to sit at different tables, but no matter where he landed, by the fridge, near the vending machine, under the emergency exit sign, someone always noticed. Hey, melon man, said Terrence from marketing, cracking open a tuna wrap. Still eating yourself? Wendell forced a soft chuckle. Not really, just cousins. Karen from HR wrinkled her nose. You eat that every day? He nodded. It's the only thing my immune system doesn't reject. Karen blinked, unsure if he was joking. She never asked again. She also never made eye contact again, and she moved her yogurt one shelf up in the fridge. The fridge. The office fridge was its own sentient entity, a cold, humming museum of culinary regret. There were forgotten casseroles from quarter 2. There was a Ziploc bag labeled, Do Not Open, Experiment. There were 6 identical containers labeled, Jen's Lunch, Do Not Touch, even though Jen hadn't worked there since 2019. Wendell's watermelon sat proudly on the bottom shelf, nestled between a half-empty LaCroix and a Tupperware of mysterious brown mush. Someone once put their leftovers on top of his container. Wendell didn't move it, but a vine quietly pushed it off an hour later. Wendell claimed no knowledge of the incident. The camera footage was mysteriously foggy. The incident. One day, a new intern named Bryce brought in a cantaloupe salad. It wasn't malicious, just generational ignorance. He plopped down next to Wendell and said, Dude, you're gonna love this. It's got goat cheese and mint and like artisanal melon cubes. Wendell looked up slowly. The room fell quiet. Somewhere, a paper towel dispenser hissed ominously. He smiled. Calm, controlled, juicy. Cantaloupe, huh? He said softly, stabbing a cube of his own watermelon. Bold choice. Bryce grinned. Melons unite, right? Wendell's left eyebrow twitched. We don't talk to the orange ones. The banter. Every Friday, the team held what they called fun lunch. It was neither fun nor lunch, but rather a collective act of pretending. Everyone brought in something homemade or store-bought or questionably foraged. There were mini quiches, beet chips, kale wraps, and once an experimental vegan chili that triggered a fire alarm. Wendell brought watermelon, always, cubed, chilled, honest. "Mel's bringing melon again," someone would always say, and Wendell would smile, raise his Tupperware and say, "It's a lifestyle, not a snack." The accounting team clapped, out of pity, or respect, or maybe because it was Friday, and they were delirious from too much Excel. The micro wars. Wendell never used the microwave. Warm watermelon was a line he would not cross, but he observed the drama from afar. Burnt popcorn, exploded spaghetti, a burrito incident so tragic, they named a Slack channel after it. One day, a co-worker tried to microwave fish. The scent seeped into Wendell's vines. He spent the afternoon smelling like sad sushi. "I think Melon Man's off today," Gordon muttered. "I think he's marinating," added Debbie. The food philosophies. Wendell once tried to explain it all to Gordon, why he only ate watermelon, why lunch was sacred, why cantaloupe was a betrayal. Gordon just blinked and said, "You ever tried meatloaf?" Wendell said, "I can't digest protein." Gordon said, "Tragic." Wendell said, "It's fine. My body runs on sunlight, electrolytes, and Google Sheets." And in that moment, under the flickering fluorescent hum of the break room ceiling, Gordon nodded in respect. Two men, one rooted in meatloaf, one in melon, coexisting. The escape. Some days, Wendell skipped the break room altogether. He'd eat outside in the narrow slice of sun near the loading dock, surrounded by weeds and hope. There, the air smelled like delivery trucks and rebellion. He'd mist his vines, munch his melon, and hum softly to himself. Occasionally, a butterfly would land on his forehead. He'd nod politely, and for 10 brief minutes, he wasn't a middle-tier accountant with photosynthetic knees. He was free. He was wild. He was lunching like a legend. Life in the office wasn't glamorous, but Wendell found peace in the routine, humor in the judgment, and pride in the pink-red cubes of his eternal lunch. Because in the world of break-room politics, Wendell Wadsworth was more than an employee. He was a melon of principle, a snack with standards, an edible enigma in slacks. Chapter 6, Weekend Waterings. The corporate grind had Wendell Wadsworth by the roots from Monday through Friday. But on the weekend, on the weekend, Wendell breathed. Not through his lungs, though those worked fine, thank you, but through his leaves. Saturday and Sunday were his sanctuary, his great unshackling, his time to soak in misty bliss and pretend, just for a little while, that spreadsheets didn't exist and QuickBooks wasn't real. The apartment, Wendell's apartment, was located on the 3rd floor of a charming old building called the Fernway, named for the invasive ferns that crept through the walls and refused to be evicted. His unit was a jungle with a lease. Every windowsill overflowed with potted plants: aloe, spider plant, snake plant, ivy, moss, and at least one that science hadn't yet identified but Wendell named Cousin Terry. He didn't own a couch. Instead, he lounged on a repurposed clawfoot bathtub filled with soil and layered with woven rugs and warm blankets. He said it helped him feel closer to the earth. Guests, when they rarely visited, said it felt like sitting in a haunted terrarium. Barbara, the sprinkler, Wendell's most prized possession, was a talking, solar-powered novelty sprinkler named Barbara. Barbara had originally been a gag gift from a co-worker who assumed Wendell liked all plant-related products. She was meant to play classical music while she watered, but something had gone terribly wrong in the programming, and she only played light jazz and the occasional smooth R&B. And she talked. Not well, but with intention. "Ready to get misty, big guy?" she'd say each Saturday morning in a raspy New Orleans accent. Wendell loved her. He placed her in the center of the living room, stood shirtless in a meditative pose, and let Barbara slowly rotate, spraying him with delicate arcs of cucumber-scented hydration. This was not weird. It was ritual. Saturday mornings. Saturday mornings were sacred. Wendell would wake with the sun, vines slightly curled from sleep, and brew a cup of herbal tea while humming to his philodendrons. He wore loose linen pants, no shirt, just chlorophyll confidence. He'd water his plants by hand, speaking softly to each of them like an overly sincere yoga instructor. You are enough. You've survived another week of neglect. I see you. Photosynthesize like no one's watching. Then he'd sit in the bathtub soil nest and journal about his feelings, which were mostly about humidity and the overuse of Comic Sans in business memos. Midday escapades. Sometimes he'd wander down to the local botanical garden, his personal mecca. He had a lifetime membership and a laminated badge that read, Friend of Ferns. He knew the plants by name. He nodded to them as he walked by. Looking sharp, Agave 12C. Still thriving, you devilish Dracaena. That's a new leaf, isn't it, Papyrus Pavilion? Don't act like I didn't notice. The staff gave him space, mostly because every time he visited, the greenhouse humidity would spike unexplainably by 12%. One intern fainted once. Wendell left him a gift basket and a signed apology note. Solo adventures. Sometimes Wendell painted. Not anything fancy, just watermelons in different outfits. Watermelon wearing a bowler hat. Watermelon in a business suit holding a briefcase. Watermelon with sunglasses, reclining on a banana peel. It was his way of exploring identity. Who am I? Really? He'd whisper. Just a melon in khakis, trying to balance debits and credits. Other weekends, he'd go to the farmer's market, stand ominously near the melon bins, and silently judge people's fruit selections. He never said anything, but if someone picked up a cantaloupe, he'd let out a slow, disappointed sigh and whisper, "You'll regret that." Evenings with jazz. As the sun went down, Wendell turned down the lights and turned up the Miles Davis. The living room glowed with soft green hues as his vine soaked up the last golden drops of light, filtering through his grow lamp. He would sip chilled cucumber water, polish his leaf trimmers, and hum softly along to the trumpet solos. Sometimes he imagined a different life, maybe as a smooth jazz melon lounge singer named Lush Wadsworth, playing in dim clubs for adoring, slightly confused crowds. Nighttime meditations. Before bed, Wendell would run a warm bath, sprinkled with mineral salts and compost tea, slide in, and just exist. He'd breathe in, breathe out, feel the dew settle on his skin, let his vines drift lazily around him like gentle aquatic tentacles. Sometimes, one of the vines would wrap around a book he hadn't finished and open it for him. Sometimes, Barbara would play Misty by Ella Fitzgerald without being asked. And sometimes Wendell would stare at the ceiling and think, am I living or simply sprouting in place? Would I be happier in a greenhouse? Do I need to do quarterly tax reviews? Or am I just afraid to grow wild? Sleep. At last, Wendell would curl up in his soil nest, surrounded by quiet, softly rustling plants. He'd tuck his vines in gently, like leafy little children, whisper goodnight to Barbara, mist himself once for luck, and drift into sleep, dreaming of wide fields, open skies, and being hugged by a sentient watermelon that said, "You did great today, buddy." In a world that constantly asked him to shrink, conform, and file everything by EOD, Wendell's weekends were his quiet rebellion, Not loud, not dramatic, just deeply hydrated peace. Chapter 7. The Great Juiceplosion. It was a Tuesday when it happened. Not a dramatic Friday, not a mystical Sunday, not even a quirky Thursday. Just Tuesday. The kind of beige, lukewarm weekday where coffee goes cold too fast, pens run out of ink mid-sentence, and you accidentally click reply all. Wendell had no idea this particular Tuesday would change everything. He just knew his forehead was feeling tingly, very, very tingly. The prelude. The day began, as it always did, with Wendell misting himself gently in the mirror, while whispering encouraging affirmations like, "I am not too much. I am enough melon for this office. My juice is valid. Karen's yogurt is not my responsibility." He wore his favorite pastel green button-up, his loose-fit khakis, and a pair of orthopedic sandals with arch support and room for unexpected root growth. He packed his lunch, watermelon cubes, as always, lemon water, and a small sprig of mint for aesthetics and morale. And he went to work, blissfully unaware that a storm of sweet, sticky chaos was about to descend upon Grindle and Grindle Financial Solutions, LLC. The meeting. At precisely 10 a.m., Wendell entered the dreaded Q2 budget review meeting. It was being held in Conference Room 3B, a space notorious for flickering lights, a faint mildew scent, and a whiteboard no one had erased since 2016. Karen from HR was there. So was Gordon, Debbie, Kyle, the yogurt one, and of course, Dale, the regional manager, a man so dry he once absorbed an entire bowl of soup by standing next to it. Wendell took his seat, pulling his vines in neatly beneath the table. He opened his notepad. He clicked his pen. He breathed. The room buzzed with awkward silence and artificial air. Dale cleared his throat. "All right, team. Let's dive into these numbers." The pressure builds. It began with a pulse, a soft thump, like a heartbeat made of compost tea and anxiety. Wendell felt it right between his eyes. A slow swelling, not painful, but urgent, like a sneeze made of chlorophyll. He shifted in his seat. His vines trembled slightly. He dabbed his forehead with a napkin. It came away, glistening. Karen raised an eyebrow. "You okay, Mel?" "Just a little photosynthetic tension," Wendell said, smiling too wide. The presentation Dale droned on, slide after slide of color-coded charts, none of which were colorblind friendly. Words like expenditure optimization and quarterly recalibration matrix floated in the air like passive-aggressive gnats. Wendell tried to focus, but the pressure in his forehead was increasing, like something was pushing out, growing, ripening. The juiceplosion. At exactly 10:37 a.m., during a discussion on company-wide toner usage, Wendell felt it happen. With a barely audible pop, a seam opened at the center of his forehead. Out flew a perfect glistening watermelon seed, spiraling through the air in slow motion, like a poetic missile. The room went silent. Everyone watched as the seed spun delicately and landed squarely in Karen's coffee. It made a soft plunk, followed by a faint fizz. Karen blinked, looked at her cup, looked at Wendell, looked back at her cup. Then, slowly, she took a sip. Everyone gasped. "It's refreshing," she whispered. The aftermath. No one knew what to say. Even Dale was speechless, and Dale once gave a 45-minute monologue about printer cartridge procurement. Wendell sat frozen. A bead of juice rolled down his temple. A single vine on his wrist waved shyly. Then Debbie began to clap. A slow, uncertain clap, like she wasn't sure if this was a breakdown or a breakthrough. Kyle joined in, then Gordon, then the room. Suddenly, Wendell Wadsworth, Melon Man, accountant of mystery, was being applauded, not for his budget insights, not for his pivot tables, but for his botanical authenticity. The promotion. That afternoon, Wendell received an email. Subject: Congratulations, dear Mr. Wadsworth. Due to your unique performance and ability to command a room, we are pleased to offer you a new role, Senior Melon Analyst 2. Please see HR for a new nameplate, an upgraded desk plant. He wasn't sure what the title meant. No one was, but it came with 2 monitors, an ergonomic melon-colored chair, and a ficus named Doug. Wendell accepted. Karen's transformation. Over the next week, odd things began to happen. Karen from HR developed an unusual glow. She started wearing brighter colors. She installed a tiny grow light above her desk. She hummed softly during staff meetings and began offering slices of cucumber to strangers. One day, Wendell passed her in the hall. She smiled. He nodded. Neither mentioned the seed, but the bond was there, silent, sacred, slightly fruity. Wendell's reflection. That night, Wendell stood on his tiny balcony with a cup of herbal mist and looked up at the stars. He touched his forehead. It was still warm, still humming, still open. He didn't know what came next, but he knew this. Something had shifted, something had bloomed, and maybe, just maybe, he was more than a quirky office plant man. Maybe he was becoming something new. A leader, a symbol, a slightly sticky prophet of productivity and pulpy self-acceptance. He misted himself softly, raised his cup to the sky, and whispered, "Let the juice flow, baby." Chapter 8. Becoming the Vine. Wendell Wadsworth didn't quit his job. Not in the dramatic, slam the laptop, you'll hear from my therapist kind of way. No emails, no exit interview, no farewell cupcakes with passive-aggressive notes that said, "Good luck, you'll need it." He simply faded. One Monday morning, the office buzzed to life as usual. The coffee pot gurgled like an anxious swamp. Gordon grumbled about printer toner. Karen sipped her seed-blessed iced latte with a glint in her eye. But Wendell's cubicle, empty, chair tucked in, computer off, succulent watered, no fanfare, no mess, just a faint shimmer of morning dew on the keyboard, and a single watermelon seed placed delicately atop a closed expense report labeled Final. The discovery. Debbie was the first to notice. She peeked over the partition, expecting to see Wendell spritzing himself with lemon mist and whispering sweet nothings to his ficus. But there was only silence, and vines, thin curling green strands coiled gently around the base of his monitor, trailing across the desk like ivy on an ancient ruin. Debbie said, frozen. "Guys?" By noon, the entire department had gathered. His cubicle had begun to transform, walls softening, vines thickening, paper clips slowly being absorbed into bark-like textures. A flower bloomed from the stapler. His desk calendar had grown roots. The motivational poster now read, "Grow where you're planted," or else. The tunnel. Behind Wendell's desk was a narrow gap between filing cabinets. It had always been there, but no one ever used it, probably due to the weird humming and the overwhelming scent of basil. Now, the gap was wider and darker and leafy. Gordon, armed with a flashlight and an expired granola bar, stepped forward. "Don't go in there," said Kyle, clutching his yogurt. But Gordon ignored him. He disappeared for 20 minutes. When he returned, He was cradling a glowing fruit the size of a basketball and softly humming jazz. He never explained what he saw. But he did stop wearing shoes, and he started referring to his desk as a nest. The legend grows. Wendell's disappearance quickly became office myth. Some said he'd become one with the HVAC system, spreading calming spores through the building to improve morale. Others claimed he'd rooted himself deep beneath the break room and was now directly connected to the coffee supply, subtly infusing every cup with wisdom and electrolytes. A few whispered that he had become a sentient shrub of justice, haunting the spreadsheets of the wicked and the unhydrated. HR denied everything, but Karen from HR just smiled knowingly and began growing succulents from her sleeves. Wendell's new life, somewhere beyond the office, deep in a lush, secret place, untouched by Google Calendar or Slack notifications, Wendell thrived. His cubicle had blossomed into a garden cathedral. Ceiling vines glowed softly. Leaves whispered reminders like, "Take breaks," and "Stretch your roots." He wore a robe made of moss and wisdom. His tie was now a length of ivy, stylishly knotted. Birds brought him regional accounting news. Breezes carried spreadsheets printed on bark. Barbara the sprinkler had evolved into a full-on forest nymph with a Bluetooth speaker and a passion for Miles Davis. He didn't work for Grindle and Grindle anymore. He was Grindle and Grindle, or at least a very chill, vine-covered entity who filed quarterly reports for woodland creatures and helped pine trees balance their nut budgets. Visitors, every so often, someone would stumble upon Wendell, a lost delivery driver, a burned-out CPA seeking answers, a deer who needed help filing joint taxes. They would emerge days later, changed, refreshed, rejuvenated, mildly sticky, but emotionally aligned. They spoke of soft jazz, echoing through sunbeams, of glowing fruit with calming voices, of spreadsheets so elegant they wept, and always, always, of Wendell, the watermelon man, sitting in lotus position atop a mossy beanbag, offering a slice of chilled melon and saying, "You are enough. Also, you're missing a signature on page 4. Back at the office, Wendell's cubicle remained untouched. Management tried to clear it out once, but the moment they unplugged his monitor, the vines hissed. Now it's roped off with a sign that reads, "Reserved for photosynthetic royalty." Every year, on Wendell's anniversary, the team gathers there with watermelon popsicles and jazz music, retelling the story of his glorious exit. New hires are skeptical. Wait, he turned into a plant? But by Q3, they believe. Everyone believes, especially after their pens start sprouting. The moral of the melon. Wendell Wadsworth was never meant to file expense reports forever. He was meant to bloom, to root, to help others unpeel the layers of corporate rot and discover the sweet fruit of self-acceptance. His story is one of hope, of hydration, of strategic retreats into vine-covered glory, because sometimes you don't need to rage against the machine. Sometimes you just quietly outgrow it and then cover it in moss. The end. But wait, a knowing Wendell, he would never leave without planting a seed of wisdom into the minds of the people. And so, a bonus epilogue, the Melon Man's Guide to Corporate Survival and Quiet Transcendence, as dictated by Wendell Wadsworth, CPA, HPL, highly photosynthetic life form. Welcome, weary spreadsheet traveler. If this pamphlet has found its way to your desk, your inbox, or tucked inside a sad conference bag between the stress ball and complimentary branded pen, it means one thing: you've begun to ripen. Whether you're feeling emotionally wilted, chronically overwatered by middle management, or just tired of eating microwaved sadness next to a printer that smells like fear, this guide is for you. Take a breath, unclench, mist your soul. Let us begin. 1. Hydration is not optional. You are 60% water. If you are a plant-based anomaly like me, you are more. Drink water. Mist regularly. If possible, establish a personal hydration ritual. Mine involved a sprinkler named Barbara and Jazz. Yours might involve cucumber water and quietly weeping into a fern. Whatever works. Moisturize emotionally. 2. Photosynthesize when possible. Don't let fluorescent lights be your only source of nourishment. Find a window, find a park, stand outside during lunch, like a lizard doing its taxes. Even 5 minutes of sun can remind you that you are more than a font. You are more than a bullet point. You are not a pivot table. You are a living organism with value. Chlorophyll or no. 3. Embrace the slow bloom. You don't have to be dazzling by Friday. You don't need to climb the corporate ladder like an over-caffeinated squirrel. Just bloom, slowly, quietly, like moss on a forgotten office chair. Success isn't always a title. Sometimes it's just a well-timed breath, a plant that doesn't die, or finally standing up to Karen about her passive-aggressive post-it notes. Progress can be soft. 4. Identify your watermelon moments. These are the moments that make you feel whole, sweet, full of seeds, metaphorically. Maybe it's fixing a broken formula in Excel and feeling like a spreadsheet sorcerer, making someone laugh during a mandatory training video, taking your lunch outside and not apologizing for the sticky Tupperware. Savor them, cultivate them, let them pollinate your Mondays. 5. Beware the cantaloupes. Not literal cantaloupes, unless you're me, long story. Cantaloupes are distractions dressed as opportunities. They sound juicy, they look promising, but they leave a weird aftertaste. Ask yourself, is this project nourishing me? Or is it just another cubicle-shaped fruit pretending to be growth? Trust your internal melon meter. 6. Know when to vine out. There will come a time when the cubicle walls close in, when your soul says, I no longer fit inside PowerPoint. When your spirit wants to grow sideways, diagonally, or into the plumbing. Do not fear this feeling. That's your root system saying, it's time. Time to grow, to evolve, to quietly disappear into a shimmering botanical dimension where jazz plays softly and your nameplate blooms in real time, or maybe just time to take a walk. Both are good. 7. Final words of wisdom. You are not a cog. You are compostable royalty. The HR handbook doesn't mention root-based leave, but ask anyway. Never be afraid to say, no, thank you. I'm fruiting this quarter. Bring your own mist bottle. Always. If all else fails, become legend. Signed, Wendell Wadsworth, Senior Melon Analyst. 2. Retired. Speaker, sprouter, soft jazz enthusiast, guardian of office plant kind, official mascot of internal rejuvenation watermelon leaf. Now go forth, tender vine. May your roots be deep, your spreadsheets balanced, and your snacks delightfully hydrating. And if you made it this far, and you're still awake, I guess you chose the caffeinated route. Bravo. I drank some Zlurb myself too. Like and subscribe and have a cozy day.